I remember the first time I saw her. It was a Tuesday, which, honestly, was already a day I hated. The kind of gray Tuesday that hangs heavy on your shoulders for no reason at all. I'd spilled coffee on my shirt that morning, missed my train, and almost cancelled dinner with a friend at a little Italian place downtown. Almost. That's where I saw her, backlit by the soft amber glow of hanging bulbs, laughing quietly with a glass of red wine in her hand. She wasn't loud. She wasn't trying. But it was like gravity shifted the second I looked at her. She had this air about her, like she belonged somewhere else, somewhere brighter than all of us. And yet, she was sitting there, calm and beautiful, as if the whole world didn't ache to be near her. Her name was Claire. I met her through my friend Michael, who introduced us without much fanfare. "This is Claire," he said casually, "she's in publishing or something." And just like that, we were in the same room, same table, same conversation. She shook my hand. Warm. Soft. Steady. There are these moments that don't feel real when they happen, but years later, you replay them so often that they become more real than anything else. That moment was one of them. We talked until the restaurant closed. About books and life, and how she believed everything tasted better with a story behind it. I told her how I worked in architecture, but felt like I'd spent more time building other people's dreams than my own. "You have kind eyes," she said, sipping her wine. It wasn't a pickup line. It was a simple observation that stayed with me long after she left. Our love didn't explode. It unfolded. Slowly. Like watching sunlight inch its way across a cold room. We went to bookstores and lost track of time. She'd pull random novels off the shelves and say, "This one smells like heartbreak. This one smells like hope." And I'd laugh, even though I knew she meant it. We cooked dinner together in my tiny kitchen, dancing to Ella Fitzgerald and Nat King Cole, flower on her nose, her hands around my waist. She was the kind of person who made everything feel like home. Even silence. She told me she used to get panic attacks at night but didn't know why. That she loved thunderstorms. That she believed in reincarnation, and that if she ever disappeared, she'd come back as a hawk. I said, "Why a hawk?" And she smiled that way she did, lips tilted like a secret. "Because they're free, but they never forget the ground." I don't know the exact moment I fell in love with her. Maybe it was the way she cried during sad movies without hiding it. Or how she'd remember the name of my 6th grade teacher after one conversation. Or the time she pulled me out of bed at 2 a.m. to look at stars because she read somewhere that Jupiter was visible. But I do know this, loving Claire was the most natural thing I'd ever done. We moved in together 6 months later. A tiny apartment near the river with creaky floorboards and a bathtub that took forever to drain. But we made it ours. She painted the walls soft blue. I built bookshelves that sagged just enough to be charming. We planted basil on the windowsill and named the plants after characters in our favorite novels. Mornings were my favorite. Waking up with her beside me, sun spilling in through the curtains, her hair tangled across the pillow. She'd open one eye and whisper, "5 more minutes," and those 5 minutes would stretch into hours of lazy love. Life was soft with her. Full of color. We dreamed about traveling the world. Starting a family. Maybe opening a bookstore cafe one day, Claire's Stories, she called it. Everything felt possible. Everything felt permanent. Looking back, I think part of me believed the universe owed us something for finding each other. That it wouldn't be cruel enough to give me this kind of love and take it away. But I was wrong. And the first cracks, they came quieter than I expected. It started with forgetfulness. Small things at first. Claire would leave the stove on. Lose her keys. Call people by the wrong names, just for a second before laughing it off. "Maybe I've got too many books in my brain," she joked one night, curling into me under a blanket. No more room for keys. But it wasn't just keys. One afternoon, she texted me in a panic. She'd gone to the grocery store and couldn't remember how she got there. She was standing in the cereal aisle, frozen, tears in her eyes, not knowing which way she came from. I left work early, drove straight there, and found her near the freezers, hugging herself. She looked at me like a child, her voice shaking. I didn't know who to call, and then I remembered your name. Like it came back in pieces. I took her to the doctor the next day. At first they told us it might be stress. Anxiety. Lack of sleep. Nothing too serious. Blood tests. Scans. Weeks of waiting. But I knew something wasn't right. She began waking up in the middle of the night, crying but not knowing why. She'd stare at her hands like they didn't belong to her. One morning, she forgot the name of the street we lived on. Then, 2 days later, she forgot the name of her sister. Watching someone you love unravel in front of you, it's like standing in a burning house with no way out. You try to hold everything together, smile for them, tell them everything's going to be okay, while your own heart breaks piece by piece. The diagnosis came on a rainy Thursday. One of those gray, heavy days that feel like they've been soaked in silence. Early onset Alzheimer's. She was only 29. I didn't cry at first. I nodded. Took the brochures. Asked questions in a calm, robotic tone. Claire sat beside me, blinking slowly, as if the words were sinking through water. When we got back to the car, she stared out the window, then whispered, "So I'm going to forget you." I broke then. Right there in the parking lot. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My chest caved in. "No," I said. "No, we won't let that happen. We'll fight this. We'll fight everything." She looked at me and smiled, not the bright, teasing smile I loved, but a quiet, resigned one. "Promise me you'll remember for both of us." Over the next few months, I watched her drift. She had good days, mornings where she'd make pancakes and hum jazz, and tell me she loved me at least a dozen times. But there were other days, too. Darker ones. Days where she wouldn't leave the bed. Days where she couldn't recognize her own handwriting. Days where she stared at her reflection like she was waiting for someone else to appear. The worst part? She knew what was happening. She was still Claire inside, still clever, still funny, still full of warmth, but she was trapped in a body turning into a stranger. Sometimes she would cling to me and whisper, "I'm scared I'm disappearing." I held her close. I memorized everything about her, her laugh, the freckle on her left cheek, the way her fingers curled when she read. I kept a journal of everything she said, every moment we shared, like I could hold on to her through words. But one evening, it happened. She forgot my name. We were brushing our teeth side by side, and she looked at me, confused. Not scared, just puzzled. You're the nice man," she said gently. "You always smile." I stared at her in the mirror. I didn't speak. If I did, I would have shattered. That night, I cried into her hair as she slept. Quiet sobs, muffled by the pillow, my arms around her like I could protect her from the storm inside her brain. Then, one day, she was just gone. Not physically. But the Claire I knew, the woman who danced barefoot on hardwood floors, who quoted poetry, who dreamed of hawks, she was fading behind her eyes. And I didn't know how to bring her back. I would look at her and wonder, where did she go? Where is the woman I love? Is she watching me from inside, screaming, trying to reach the surface? I was losing her. Every day. Inch by inch. And the worst part? There was nothing I could do. But then, something happened. Something I never expected. And it changed everything. After Claire forgot my name, something inside me broke. Not like a snap. Not all at once. It was slower than that, like a rope fraying thread by thread, until one day it just wasn't holding anything anymore. I stopped seeing friends. Stopped going to work. I told them I needed time off, family emergency. They said take all the time you need. But no one tells you what to do with time when it turns into a prison. The apartment that once felt like home now felt haunted. I'd pass by the bookshelves we built together, the blue walls she painted with her favorite brush, and feel this hollow ache. I'd stare at the photos on the wall, her laughing in the mountains, her kissing my cheek at the beach, and wonder how that version of her could feel so close and so impossibly far at the same time. She was still there. Physically. Sitting on the couch, sometimes humming, sometimes silent. But she was slipping. And I was drowning in the silence she left behind. Every morning, I'd go through the same routine. Wake up. Check on her. Try to spark something. Morning, Claire. Want some pancakes? Blank stare. Sometimes she'd nod. Sometimes she'd ask who I was. One morning, she asked where her mother was. Her mother had passed away 5 years ago. I told her gently. She got angry. Then she cried like a child. Then she forgot all over again. I was watching the woman I loved become a ghost, and I was becoming one too. I stopped shaving. Stopped eating regularly. I'd stay up all night watching old videos of us on my phone, her blowing out birthday candles, her singing in the car, her reading a line of poetry and smiling at the camera like she could see into my soul. I wasn't me anymore. I didn't laugh. I didn't dream. I just existed to keep her safe. And yet, I couldn't let her go. One night, around 2 a.m., I found her standing by the front door in her pajamas. Where are you going? I asked. She looked at me confused. I have to find someone, she said. I forget who. I walked her back to bed, tucked her in, and sat beside her all night, my hand over hers. That was when I realized, love doesn't disappear when the person does. Love is what stays behind. But I wasn't just losing her. I was losing myself. I stared at the man in the mirror one morning, and didn't recognize him. Pale. Hollow eyes. A shell. She used to call me light. That's what she said when we first moved in together. You walk into a room and it gets warmer. Now I was a shadow. Still, I didn't give up. I started journaling everything. Every small detail she remembered. Every flicker of recognition. I recorded voice notes, wrote letters to her she might never read. I played her favorite songs. Made her favorite tea. Read the books she loved out loud every night, even when she fell asleep or stared blankly at the wall. Do you remember this one? I'd whisper. You said it smelled like hope. One day, while reading to her, I said a line from the book just so, the exact way she used to say it. And something in her eyes changed. She smiled. Faint. Small. But real. That was the moment I decided, I'm not just going to watch her fade. I'm going to fight. Even if it breaks me. Even if I become someone else entirely in the process. Because this isn't just about memory. This is about love. And love, real love, doesn't surrender. Then, something happened. A voicemail. A voice I hadn't heard in years. A man claiming he knew something about Claire's condition. Something that wasn't in the medical reports. Something buried. And just like that, the story changed. The voicemail was short. Shaky voice. Heavy breathing. Just 10 seconds long. She doesn't have Alzheimer's. Not really. They lied to her. I have proof. Meet me. I replayed it at least 20 times. Every word hit like a thunderclap. It didn't make sense. Claire had been to 3 doctors. Multiple scans. Specialists. We had test results, folders full of them. How could someone lie about that? Still, something in me woke up. For the first time in months, I felt angry. Alive. Like a match had been struck in the darkness I'd been drowning in. I called the number back. Straight to voicemail. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up rereading everything, Claire's records, notes I had taken, timelines I'd mapped out in desperation. Things that once seemed like coincidences began to feel like patterns. She got worse after a new medication. The specialist we were referred to. No online presence. No reviews. No listed office. I started digging. The voice belonged to Dr. Ian Redford, a former neurologist who had worked at a private research facility called Neurovalley. The name rang a bell. Claire had visited the facility months before her symptoms got worse, part of a voluntary study on cognitive preservation. She told me it was nothing, just a few questionnaires, maybe a brain scan. She said they paid her $100. She laughed it off. But now, I wasn't laughing. I found a forum. Old threads. Whispers about memory manipulation trials, hush money, NDAs. Stories buried in noise and conspiracy. People asking if Neurovalley had experimented on patients without consent. A few angry posts, quickly removed. A lawsuit filed and then, settled. One thing stood out. Every case involved a young person who developed atypical neurodegenerative symptoms after visiting Neurovalley. Like Claire. I drove to the last known address of Dr. Redford. A cheap motel outside the city. He answered the door looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. Gaunt. Nervous. Stubble on his face. Eyes darting around like the shadows were watching. I don't have long, he whispered. They're monitoring me. Tell me what happened to her. He pulled out a flash drive. They were testing a neural recalibration drug, Memrex. It was supposed to improve memory retention by targeting specific neural clusters. But they weren't ready. Side effects were severe. Some volunteers showed signs of degeneration within weeks. Claire, she must have been part of the control group. But something went wrong. She never agreed to that. She didn't know. That's the worst part. I begged them to pull out of the trial. They silenced me. My hands shook. I can help you reverse it, he said. But it has to be soon. The longer the damage progresses, the harder it is to undo. I took the drive and left. I didn't tell Claire. She was having a good day, smiling, singing an old song she didn't remember the lyrics to. I didn't want to ruin it. Instead, I met with a lawyer. A friend of mine from college. He took one look at the documents on the drive and went pale. You realize this is criminal, right? He said. This company, if this gets out, it'll burn them to the ground. Good, I said. I leaked the files anonymously. The media picked it up within 24 hours. Experimental memory trial cover-up, leaked data reveals unconsented human testing. The story went viral. Investigations reopened. Neurovalley denied everything, of course, but the internet doesn't forget, even if the human brain does. Within days, the pressure mounted. I didn't care about justice for the world. I cared about Claire. Dr. Redford gave me a new treatment protocol, an experimental counteragent developed in secret before the trials were shut down. Risky. Unapproved. But it was our only shot. I asked Claire if she trusted me. She looked at me like she hadn't in months. You're the man who always smiles, she said, softly. I know you. That was all I needed. We started the treatment. The first few days were rough, headaches, confusion, fever. I sat by her bedside through all of it. Wiped her forehead. Read to her. Held her hand. Then something changed. She looked at me one morning and said, "Is it Sunday?" I blinked. Yeah, it is. I used to make cinnamon rolls on Sundays, she said, her voice clear. You hated them because they stuck to the pan. I stared at her. You remember that? She smiled. Bright. Real. I think I'm starting to remember you. And just like that. Hope. Real, terrifying, impossible hope. There's a kind of hope that doesn't feel like light. It feels like weight. Because when someone you love starts to come back to you, after you've already begun grieving them, you don't just feel joy. You feel fear. Terror, even. That it might be temporary. That the universe might change its mind. Claire was improving. Slowly. But undeniably. The experimental treatment wasn't magic, it didn't bring her memories rushing back all at once. It was more like rain after a long drought. Small, quiet moments of clarity that you almost miss if you're not paying attention. She started recognizing old songs. Remembering punchlines to jokes we hadn't told in years. One night, she quoted an entire poem she once loved, Pablo Neruda, word for word. And I cried. Because I'd read that poem to her every night for 3 months after she started fading. I didn't think she heard me. But she had. Some part of her had. I wasn't the same man anymore. Not the one who designed buildings. Not the one who used to laugh with friends over beers on Friday nights. That version of me had been stripped away. Grief does that. And love reshapes you in its image. I had become someone else. Someone who could research neuroscience late into the night. Someone who could administer medication by syringe without shaking. Someone who could comfort a woman he loved even when she screamed at him, not recognizing his face, because now, those days were fewer, but they still came. And I endured them. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. But with the strength that comes when you've chosen love, even when it's not easy. Even when it costs you everything. I'd given up my career. My savings. My former life. But I'd gained something I couldn't explain. I understood time differently now. I stopped planning for years ahead. I started treasuring 20-second glances, the way her hand found mine in a crowd, the sound of her whispering my name in the middle of the night. She knew my name again. Not every day. But often enough to believe she would, one day, remember it every morning. And she said something to me one night that I'll never forget. We were lying on the floor, listening to vinyl records, the lights low, her head on my chest. I thought she'd fallen asleep. But she whispered. You saved me. And you disappeared to do it. I didn't respond. I just held her tighter. Because she was right. I had disappeared. Into love. Into pain. Into sacrifice. Into something that looked nothing like the man I used to be. But for the first time, I wasn't mourning that loss. I had become the man she needed. Not perfect. Not whole. But real. Her memories weren't all restored. Some would never come back. But something better was happening now. We were building new ones. Claire laughed again. Danced barefoot again. She even started writing, just fragments of poetry, little lines that spilled onto napkins and notebooks. But her voice was there. That sharp, beautiful, impossible voice I fell in love with. We made cinnamon rolls on a Sunday. They still stuck to the pan. We laughed. And for one golden afternoon, it felt like time had folded in on itself. Like we'd found a way back to the beginning. But deep down, I knew the truth. Love this deep always comes with a cost. And the final chapter of our story. It was still waiting for us. Time didn't stop. Even when I wished it would. Claire and I had bought more time, months of laughter, memories, healing, but the truth was always quietly waiting outside the door. Her condition had been slowed, not erased. The damage had been done. And even the best medicine in the world couldn't undo everything. Some days were beautiful. Others were heartbreak in slow motion. But we stayed. We stayed in it. Together. One afternoon in late October, we sat by the river near the edge of town. The trees were burning with color, fiery orange, crimson red, gold that shimmered in the wind. She rested her head on my shoulder, quiet, calm. "Do you remember the first time we came here?" I asked. She closed her eyes. "I don't think I do," she said softly. "But I feel like I remember how it made me feel." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. "I don't need the memories," she continued. "I have you. And you carry the rest." And she looked at me like she saw me. Not like a stranger. Not like a blur. But like the man she loved. Even if she couldn't name every reason why. She passed away a few weeks later. Peacefully. In her sleep. I was holding her hand. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream. I just sat there quietly, like I was watching a part of the world go dark. Not violently. Not with fury. But like the final line of a song you don't want to end. The funeral was small. Intimate. Just family, a few friends, people who understood who she was, even when she no longer remembered who they were. I read something I had written for her. A letter. "I loved you when you remembered me. I loved you when you didn't. I loved you in the quiet and in the storm. You once told me that hawks never forget the ground. So I'll be here, always. Watching the sky." Afterward, I sat by the river again. Alone this time. The wind cold against my face. And I realized something. Love and pain are not opposites. They are two hands holding the same truth. To love deeply is to risk deeply. To lose deeply. But it's also to live deeply. And I had lived. She gave me that. Her illness, her fading, it didn't take her away from me. It revealed how far I was willing to go. Who I was willing to become. And what it truly meant to love without conditions, without guarantees, without a timeline. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. I still talk to her sometimes. When I pass the river. When I make cinnamon rolls. When I hear Ella Fitzgerald in a cafe, or see a hawk circling the sky. And in those moments, I feel her. Not just as memory. But as presence. As love. Because the truth is. She's not gone. Not really. She's just waiting. Somewhere in the silence. And one day. I'll see her again. Subscribe, like, and tell people about this love.